Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is having a good day, or you've had a good day, depending on what time zone you're in. Thank you for attending our virtual event tonight called In the Mood for Love. This event is named after one of my favorite movies, directed after one of my favorite directors, Wong Kar-wai, which is also a romance movie. My name is Irene Chan, if you don't know me. I'm the program chair of the New York Book Forum. The New York Book Forum is a 501c3 nonprofit whose mission is to build bridges between the publishing world and the public, which includes booksellers like Katherine, authors, print providers, and book consumers and designers like Nguyen. As part of our mission, we present a different program every third Wednesday of the month, almost every month throughout the year, alternating between in-person and virtual. It is only through collective effort that we're able to do these events every month, of not just the programming committee and myself, but also through participants on our programs like Nguyen and Katherine today, but also people who are joining in at our events like you. So we're all here tonight because in some way we are connected to books and to each other. So thank you for joining our virtual event today. So today we're going to dive into the romance genre and explore the journey of the romance genre throughout the years. I can't say the sentence that I wrote. Romance has evolved into one of the most diverse, boundary-pushing narratives in storytelling today. So whether this is a genre that you really love or a genre you've never approached, I hope you find this program informative. So tonight we have with us Katherine Zofrea, General Manager of Ripped Bodice Bookstore in Park Slope in Brooklyn. Ripped Bodice is a bookstore that focuses specifically on the romance genre with beautiful displays, curated selections, and a wonderful staff. They're an independent bookstore with locations in Los Angeles and Brooklyn. So if you're in the Brooklyn area or Los Angeles area, please give them a visit. We also have with us tonight Nguyen, an art director at Penguin, also a freelance illustrator and an editorial cartoonist. Nguyen has designed gorgeous covers, which you may know of, such as the cover for How Not to Die Alone by Richard Roper or Dickens and Prince by Nick Hornby. So let's start off. So Katherine, let's start off. Can you tell us about your journey into the romance genre and what led you to Ripped Bodice?
Yeah, so I feel like I've been reading romance in general my entire life. I always say like Anne Shirley and Gilbert Blythe from Anne of Green Gables, they were like my first rivals to lovers type romance that made me fall in love with love. And I'd always been an avid reader. I was interested in working with books in some way, especially after 2020. Before that, I had been a performer, and the theater industry was a little messy at that time. So I saw a advertisement for the Ripped Bodice was hiring, and I was like, I love romance. I read a ton of romance books. I'd love to get involved and work there. And I got hired at the LA location. And then back in 2023, our store owner, Leah, was like, do you want to move to New York and open another location? And I said, sure. So now I'm out here. But I've always read very much all genres within romance. I'm a big contemporary or fantasy or historical lover. Basically, if it has like a good love story and a happily ever after, like I am there. So, yeah.
There is a huge genre within romance, and my theory is that people who say they don't read romance, I'm willing to bet that many of them actually have. They just don't realize that they have yet.
Exactly. There's something for everyone. And if you haven't found your romance niche yet, then it's my job to help you find it. So, yeah.
Nguyen, can you tell us what about romance draws you in?
Well, as a cover designer, romance is such a fun genre to work on because these stories are so emotional and passionate and expressive, and they provide such great opportunities to experiment with. If you walk into a bookstore, what's the most colorful section? It's the romance section. Which section has like the most sparkle and the most foil and is the prettiest, quite honestly? It's the romance section. So these novels provide such a great opportunity for us to experiment with different kinds of illustration, different styles. And I find that romance authors and romance readers are some of the biggest champions for diversity and inclusion too. So that also opens the door for, so much experimentation in terms of what characters can look like from human to non-human and all of that. So it's just super, super fun. And as someone who loves color, as you can see from my background, and even if you look at Katherine's background, you can see like these stories are quite honestly, the prettiest. So.
Yeah, there is definitely a lot of, and romance is leading. I feel like romance is leading the charge in special effects. So like I work in production and publishing, and romance gets a lot of the bling, and that's a lot of what drives edge print, which is like the hottest effect of the decade. Well, that's what I'm calling it. But yeah, have you done edge print designs?
I have, yeah. I feel like the romance community has really embraced the book as like a beautiful physical object that you have in your home as something that you want to like enjoy looking at and like display proudly. Especially because like romance readers tend to be some of the most like voracious and consistent readers that there are. So when you have shelves and shelves of books, you want them to look beautiful. So they've been very embracing of like the foil and the special effects, and edge printing happens to be one of the ones that's like super hot right now. And like, why not? There's this other whole surface on the book that you can decorate. And I feel like with especially this rise of romantasy, books that have these deep worlds and all these characters and symbols and symbolism and different kinds of weapons and maps and things, like there's so many things that you can visually depict for your end papers or your edges and all of that. So it's a good opportunity to like go beyond the cover of what you can show. Just another whole opportunity to do something cool. And as a reader, like I just love the look of them. Like I find that when I go to a bookstore like the Ripped Bodice and I see a table full of books and a couple of them have edge printing, I like can't help but pick it up. There's just something like that is so magnetic about it.
Right, because you do judge a book by its cover a little bit.
Yes, we all do. We can.
Katherine, I understand there's a whole section devoted to edge print at the bookstore.
Yeah, right now we have a whole end cap right now that's judge a book by its sprayed edge, and all the book spines are faced inward, and it's all just the different edge printing. There's like all the different colors and the foiling and the different designs and full-on pictures on some of them, which is so fun. And people have been loving it. They are immediately drawn to that like visual stimulation and like, oh, this is something fun, something different, something that like I would want to hold physically versus like, oh, well, I can read that on my Kindle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's like if they're all displayed spine side in, you don't necessarily know what that book is. Like you have to pull it out, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it does. It is a little bit of a like sales strategy too, of like, well, now they're physically holding it. They're a lot more likely to read the back, see what it's all about. So something that they might not necessarily have picked up to begin with, they're more engaged with.
Do you find that certain edge designs, people are like, do you find there's something about edge designs, like a particular style, whether it's like simplistic or like super busy, that tends to draw more customers?
I think ones that, because there's the wide range where it's just like the plain color. And then there's ones where it's like kind of an ombre effect. And then there's ones where it is like a little bit of floral, but nothing like too crazy. And then there's ones where it's like really intricate drawings. I find kind of in the middle range tends to really draw people in. So there's that. I don't know. I'm not too sure what exactly it is about the difference between those. Maybe Vianne has some insight, but yeah.
Like the single versus the intricate designs.
Yeah.
It's money.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, the more intricate it is, the longer the production timelines. Irene, I'm sure you know, and the more expensive it is. So, Catherine, do you ever hear from people who don't like the edge printing and like ask you for a copy that doesn't have it?
I don't think I've ever had anyone ask for one that doesn't have it. I feel like the edge printing is a little bit different than the spine design itself, because for the most part, when we're displaying a book, like I'm displaying books at home, it is, spine out. So if the spines match and the edges don't, it's not as much of a big deal. I do have like up here, those are all sprayed edges and edge designs up there. So it can be a fun way to display the books, but I think people are less, if it is like a visual thing, something that they're like, I want to display this at my house, it's not as much a deterrent of if they don't already have something in the same series. So, yeah.
Do you find people buy the same series? So like they'll want the one of the sprayed edge or the edge print, and then they'll want like a regular edition? Do you have customers that come in and they buy
for sure?
Yeah.
For sure. The most recent example I can think of is the latest Rebecca Yarros one. We had people who pre-ordered even both the deluxe edition and the standard edition. And the only difference between those two was the sprayed edge. So
is this customer, is a lot of this just people that want them, or are they kind of like social media influencers or book talkers? Do you know?
Too sure. I think it's people just have collections. I'm assuming they just have a collection of multiple editions at their homes. So they want to have like all the different editions that are available.
As a designer, Vianne, do you take this perspective in where you think like, okay, if a person is going to buy 4 of these books, but the different editions of each one, are you thinking like, how do I design this cover to make it interesting so that they don't have essentially the same looking book?
For sure. Yeah. You want the deluxe edition to stand out enough where someone feels compelled to, like, quite honestly spring for it, because oftentimes it's, $30-$40, and that's not a small amount of money. So if they're going to buy that edition, let alone 2 editions, it has to feel worth it. And that's when we'll bring in something like the foil or embossing or shimmery pearl paper and the edge printing. So yeah, I was just working on a deluxe edition for Carly Fortune's first book, Every Summer After. I don't know if you guys know this one, but all the bells and whistles are going into the deluxe edition of this one, because we know Carly's fans probably already have this regular edition. So what's going to compel them to pick up something that they've already read? And so it has to be super beautiful. So we're doing like case printing and edge printing and a foil on the jacket with pearl paper. It's going to be gorgeous, and we want to make it worth it for them for sure.
Oh my God.
People are going to love that. I already know.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
The print salespeople here, they're like, oh, wow. That's the one they want with all the bells and whistles. What a nice one. Let's talk a little bit. I feel like romantasy is topping the charts. But Katherine, is that accurate?
Yeah, there's definitely, at least at our store, a very high demand for like romantasy, fantasy romance, anything within that range. We have a fantasy romantasy book club at the store, and that one is definitely one of our higher attended book clubs, which is awesome. So people are loving the genre.
What what do you attribute that to? Why do you think that's happening?
I think a little bit of escapism is part of it. I think the slightly more intricate worlds is definitely part of it. I would imagine, with contemporaries are, I mean, they're everyday people experiencing everyday things for the most part. So for the readers who want just that little bit of magic and little bit of like, well, what if I get kidnapped by a really hot fae and we go rule the kingdom together? Like, would that be such a bad thing? I think there is a little bit of that in there.
When we're talking about romantasy cover designs, the ones that I've seen, I think the first thing I think of when I think of an image of a romantasy cover, like a title font with a lot of filigree on it.
Mm-hmm.
So, Vian, what do you think of when you think about designing a romantasy cover?
Well, I mean, the first thing is you want it to be recognizable to those fans. So there's a pretty strong design language and like a visual language around what a romantasy book looks like. And we want those readers to find them. And they are familiar with, like you said, the filigree, the intricate borders, some kind of like a symbol or some kind of object from the story that's really evocative. And yeah, I mean, you really just want each book to find the right audience, and romantasy is no different. And, I feel like Rebecca Yarros is a good example of a cover that is both familiar to that audience, but also pushes the boundaries of design a little bit and being like a little bit more, a little bit simpler than like the super intricate borders and all of this, but still very legible to that romantasy audience. So yeah.
I definitely feel like the covers have changed. Like each genre definitely has its type of cover, but over the years, covers for romance titles have evolved over time. Also, like in the 70s, we had a lot of this like shirtless men, and they always had like a flowy shirt. And then we went to like really we went to like simple like items. Like you had that 50 Shades, and it was just like cufflinks or like like cufflinks and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see like these trends as they move into different areas, and now we're kind of in this romance covers with graphics.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, so I think now, especially with romance, it's in a less realistic realm. Do you think the cover designs will swing back towards more realism, like photographs instead of graphics?
I think we're already starting to see a swing back toward realistic looking covers, not photographs, but more detailed and more illustrated, like intricately illustrated covers. I think one of the reasons why there was a swing away from the photographic shirtless man is that romance stories were starting to get more diverse and reaching more people. And when you're limited to just what photos and what models are out there, there's only a certain number of things that are available. But if you do illustration, you can make those characters look like whatever the book demands, any race, any body size, human, non-human. So it really opens up the possibilities. And I started working in romance covers right around the time when like the more simple graphic covers were coming out, like I think of Jasmine Guillory as like the prototypical example of when that really started. And there were very simple illustrations at first, but over the last 8 years or so, they've been getting more and more detailed and more realistic. And I think that's down to like representation and showing characters as they are. And you're already seeing really detailed illustrations. And I think we're going to be moving more in that direction because I think audiences want to see what these characters look like. And you're also seeing authors like commission character art that's separate from their book covers to show even more detail of what the characters look like. And audiences seem to really love it. So I think we're already seeing that start to move in that trend.
Excellent. Katherine, how much does the cover design determine the book's placement in the store?
I don't know if it really determines placement. I will say like ones that have very attractive covers, we are more likely to face them outwards versus having them just spine out. Or they will be like featured on an end cap or put as a staff pick. There's definitely a draw to the more covers that just draw the eye, and having those more at the forefront. Like I said, people do judge books by their covers. So, yeah.
Do you find that a more compelling, or maybe compelling is not the right word, but a cover of more bling? So we call them like special effects, or things like neon ink. Do you think that does that draw new customers in more? So if someone isn't super familiar with romance and they're not in the store looking for a specific author, does that stuff help?
I think so. I think covers that. So for someone who's newer to the genre, if they see a cover that is something that maybe they're more familiar with, or like I've seen recently quite a few covers that have this like almost vintage poster design get pretty popular, and people have been really into that, especially newer readers, because it feels almost like a movie cover to them. So I think that is definitely something that draws like the newer audience in. Or on the flip side, ones where it is kind of the more flower, abstract type thing, then they might not be as embarrassed to read it on the subway, even though they have nothing to be embarrassed about, in my opinion. But definitely if someone is newer to the genre and they might not be as comfortable being like, yes, this is a romance book, if they're reading it on the subway, it's a little bit more discreet. People tend to be drawn to that, especially the newer romance readers.
I think one of the things that I like a lot about romance is that it does have more inclusive stories, I think, than what regular medium has. So like movies aren't telling the same stories that romance novels are telling. And I do recommend for everyone to read them, especially if I have male friends, because I think they have a lot more emotional development than other books men might be reading, than nonfiction, and stuff like that. And so I definitely think this genre leads the way towards what's going to be more popular mainstream in the movies. And I'm hoping to see more of that happen. When do you think that tipping point is, Katherine?
Like when they're
like, how much more popular does romantasy have to get before they make a movie? Because I think they will.
I mean, I've seen that there's some in the works. I know Rebecca Yarros is in the works right now. This is all speculation, but I do think that like Hollywood executives and all that, I mean, first of all, it is very male dominated. So they are a little bit more hesitant to put money into something that is very female centric, and that's what romance tends to be. And I think it is definitely probably a budget thing of they aren't too sure how it is. So it's kind of a game of chicken of like, okay, who's going to do it first to show that like it is popular. And unfortunately, I've seen like so many shows where they'll get like one season or two seasons and then they'll get canceled. And I don't know what's going through the minds of those like Hollywood executives making those decisions. The best example I can think of is My Lady Jane, which was just on Amazon Prime, which in all of my circles, people were loving it. They were talking about it. It was so popular. And then suddenly it was like, nope, we're canceling. And it was so confusing and so weird. So I'm not too sure what's going to be the thing to be like, no, take a chance on this. This is what the people want. This is what the girls want.
Yeah. And I mean, romance is just really emotionally compelling. I think a lot of it is about like that emotional connection. And when I talk to people that aren't familiar with the genre, they're kind of like, romance, I would never read that. And it's like, well, why not? Aren't you an emotional person? Don't you want emotional connection? And I find that too when I look at different covers. Like when I'm looking at romance covers, a lot of what draws me to a romance book is like you can sometimes feel this emotional connection when you're looking at that cover. You can see that there's something there versus, I mean, you're looking at nonfiction. I'm not feeling, looking at a cover of Hamilton, I'm not feeling emotionally drawn to this. I'm interested in it, but it's not pulling at my heartstrings. I think that's hard to design. I mean, I think it is. Is it hard to design, Deanne? That emotional connection?
It can be. I mean, it's super fun. It can be hard to get like just the right expression on each character. And we do work really hard to make sure like the body language and the facial expressions are true to the book and true to the author's vision, and like hit the right tropes. Like if something's enemies to lovers, we want that to come across on the cover, or if something's a slow burn, then you're not necessarily going to want like a full-on clinch on the cover and that kind of thing. So we do think very deeply about like what should the characters on the cover be doing? Should we see them at all? Should we see them partially obscured? And how close should they be? What kind of like embrace or non-embrace are they in? So a lot of thought goes into that. And I wish that I could show like a cover meeting to every reader so they could see just how much we do think about it. And like how many options that our cover art team will present to the publishing team, and how many rounds of revisions we go through to get it perfect, or at least as perfect as we can under whatever time constraints and what have you. But yeah, we do put a lot of thought into it.
That's really curious. Are those cover meetings more like not emotionally intense, but like, are you talking about emotions more when you're in a cover meeting talking about romance covers versus a different genre?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. There's in-depth discussion about every arched eyebrow and how many buttons should be unbuttoned on this Minotaur's shirt and all of that. Every detail is looked at.
Oh wow, I had no idea. That's a whole different. Did you know that, Catherine? I didn't know that. It's a whole different level of appreciation for romance covers.
I would love to sit in on a meeting, a cover design meeting for sure, because there's so many times where I see a cover, I'm like, ooh, this is good. This one, like, especially the like clinch covers. I'm a big clinch cover fan, so anytime I see something that like has the right amount of buttons unbuttoned, and I'm like, ooh, the tease. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad the clinch is back. There were a few years there where people were shying away from the clinch, I think, to like avoid stigma or whatever. But I think, it's coming back, and I love the clinch as well.
There's something about it that's just so like evocative, and especially in romance, the steamier romances, it's like, oh, this is fun. This gives you like a little preview of what the relationship is going to be like. Yeah. I love seeing them. Anytime it's like Tuesday and we're bringing out the new books, I'm like, this is great and this is fun. Yeah.
Well, you want people to know what they're getting into, right? Like,
oh yeah, absolutely.
Do you have a preferred subgenre? Is that your preferred subgenre, Catherine, within romantasy? I mean, romance.
I mean, I read full wide range. I'm very much a mood reader, so it really just depends. I will read. Most recently, I read like 45 Ruby Dixon books in like 3 months. I was just like plowing through those. Oh, hers are so fun. But then I'll like jump over and be like, right now I'm about to start reading a bunch of Joanna Lindsay ones, get some of the older historicals in there, and then I'll be in a contemporary mood. I'm such a mood reader. It really just depends. Yeah.
Is historical romance as popular as it was a decade ago? If people moved.
It's interesting because it isn't necessarily as popular. I feel like it has kind of been on a downward. It, People just haven't been picking it up as much. However, we do hold quite a few historical romance events at the store, and they're so like widely attended and very much like if we have a historical romance panel recently we had it was Adriana Herrera, Joanna Shoup, and Sarah McLean, the three of them, and that was super popular event. And anytime we have a historical romance event, tons of people come, they're so excited. So it might be a little bit smaller of an audience right now, but the audience that there is so passionate about it and they love the historical romances. I don't know why they aren't more popular because I'm like, Bridgerton is right there and it's so popular as a show. And there's so many books that have that similar vibe. So I'd love to see it make a comeback.
I wonder if it's like overcapacity. Like if the show, like if people are watching the show, then they're not as inclined to, you know, put their energy into a book of the same genre.
Yeah, I'm not too sure. I don't know if people just aren't aware that like now there's a whole genre that you can read. Yeah.
Is there a subgenre at the end that you really like in romance to design for, or just like to read?
I'll read anything. I'm not too picky. I do like a slow burn or like something with a lot of longing, but that can be across any genre. So I'm not too picky. For designing, honestly, like I don't have a great answer for this either. I love them all. I think that's why I feel so lucky that I work on the Berkeley imprint, which if you guys are familiar, publishes all kinds of romance from contemporary to rom-com to romantasy. So I get to like dip my toe into pretty much everything. So I don't have to be, pigeonholed into one. And I am very happy about that.
Do you think that there's something that's to both of you? Is there something in romance that's overplayed right now and you think it's on its way out like a trope,
I don't want to see any billionaire love interests anymore. I'm over that.
Yeah. Billionaires are kind of out right now.
Yes.
I think the billionaire one, Mafia was really big for like a couple of years, but I haven't seen as many Mafia come out. Or like, I think people love enemies to lovers, but especially in like a contemporary setting, I think it's hard to execute. And so it's rare to find like a really good enemies to lovers. That's my hot take, is it's hard to find a really good enemies to lovers book right now.
I think that's a trope that never goes out. But yeah, you're right. Finding a good one is really difficult. And I like the optimist in me. I like to think people like the enemies to lovers storyline because deep down we all just want to like everyone. I think deep down we all want to get along. That's my theory on it.
Yeah, I think there's something about like the tension and like it's like the Lizzie Bennet Darcy type thing where it's there's a certain amount of tension and they don't like each other, but then they come to an understanding, and there's something about a man who fixes himself for you that's really hot. So yeah.
I think the thing that I hate most in romance is when it's a storyline that's based off of like one misunderstanding and like that's all it's hinged on. Mm-hmm. But if it wasn't that, then there really would be nothing else there. Like there'd be no plot line if there wasn't one simple misunderstanding.
Yeah, the miscommunication thing is a hard one. I feel like it definitely gets a bad rep, and you're not alone in not liking the miscommunication trope. I do think like every trope, if done well, can be really fantastic. Like for me personally, I am not like an accidental pregnancy person. I do not like that trope. However, Hannah Boehm Young wrote Out on a Limb, which does have an accidental pregnancy, and I loved that book. And that one kind of proved me wrong. So I was like, okay, so I can like it. It depends on the situation and the circumstances and all of that. So yeah.
So, rounding off towards the end of this, where do you see romance going in the future, like in the next 20 years? Like it's not going anywhere.
Yeah. I think it's just going to get more popular. My like hope for romance as a genre is that it does start to get taken more seriously, which it has been more so than even like 5 years ago. So I'd love to see people be like, this is a legitimate genre just because it is more appreciated by women doesn't mean like it's silly and there's no like depth to it. And seeing that from like the wider community, the wider bookish community, I'd love to see us continue in that direction, as well as just seeing even more diversity in the genre. I think is really important. And my hope is that it continues in that trajectory.
I want to see more men reading romance.
Yeah.
I want more men to read it. Vian, but what about you? What do you hope for romance?
I completely agree with Katherine. I think romance is being taken more seriously, but there's still a lot of room for growth in that area. 5 years ago, we weren't seeing romance roundup review coverage in like a place like the New York Times, but now the New York Times is covering romance all the time, which is awesome. But there is still sort of this idea that, literary novels are good and prestigious, and something like genre romance and other genres are like lesser, more frivolous. And you see this also in like, I don't know how aware of people are outside of like book design circles, but like there's book cover awards where like at the end of the year, there'll be like 10 best book covers, and they're always all literary novels. And I think that's just the prevailing attitude is like, if it's literary looking, that means it's good. But I, work across a lot of genres, including romance and including some literary novels. And I can tell you it is just as challenging, if not more challenging, to do a good romance cover as it is a literary cover. So I would love to see romance cover design being taken more seriously in the same way.
Yeah, after what you said about the amount of discussion that goes into this romance cover, I'm sure for every cover, but the nuance of looking at body language so intensely.
Totally.
Yeah, like I would never have thought that. I just feel connected to a book when I look at it, but that's because designers and people at publishing houses are having all these discussions to make sure that customers look at a cover and feel connected, and then and booksellers making sure that they display them and finding something about them. I read this thing. I read this article once about this man who, when his mother passed away, he was cleaning out her house, and he also had access to her Kindle. So he went into her Kindle library, and it was all romance. That's all she read, and to feel more connected to his late mother, he read or listened to every single book she had on her Kindle, which was all romance. I thought that was really nice.
That is really nice. That is also my biggest fear is someone going into my Kindle.
Put it in your will. Delete my Kindle.
Yeah, like that's so sweet. And I'm so glad he's connected to his mother in that way. No one should go into my Kindle, please.
You got to set up those. You got to set up a, what's it called? What is it? Doomsday thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
To make sure no one signs it. All right. So tell both of you, each of you, tell me what is your favorite YA romance novel, if you can think of one quickly.
I brought visual aids.
So what
This
visual aids?
selfishly, this is a cover that I worked on a few years ago. It's The Charmed List by Julie Abe. Beautiful, I guess light romantasy. There's magical elements to it, but and also sort of enemies to lovers elements to it. But these two teens who don't get along are forced to go on a road trip together and encounter magical challenges along the way. It's really gorgeous.
Can you hold that cover up again and tell us how you dissected this body language when you were designing it?
Well, it's a very sweet story, and we wanted to capture like that adolescent like crush kind of feel. I don't know if you guys remember like slow dancing at a middle school dance and having your arms around, this like awkward middle school dance position. And they're floating in the sky to kind of get at that magical feel. And we've got constellations kind of illustrating elements of the story, like the boba, and there's a little cupcake. So that was super fun to work on.
So cute. I literally am like looking around, seeing what I have. One of my all-time favorites is Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Alir Sayans. It is a story of these two Mexican-American boys who are figuring out their sexuality and also their like relationship with their nationality and their, are they Mexican enough? Are they American enough? That whole thing. And it is a journey from when they're 15 when they meet to there's a sequel when they're like 18, 19. And it's such a beautiful story of like finding self and figuring out yourself and your family, as well as this relationship, this friends to lovers romance that they develop. Yeah.
I think you got to touch on this question. So we have a question in the chat here from Edson Atwood. And Edson asks, do LBGTQ books follow the same basic tropes as other romance books, or do they have their own tropes or trajectories?
I think they do. They do have follow the same like basic tropes. Like you can have the friends to lovers, enemies to lovers, fake dating, all of those basic tropes. They do tend to have another element to them where it's especially in YA, that coming out element, that figuring out yourself. But honestly, I feel like all YA has that, where when you're a teenager, you're like, I don't know what's happening. And so there's that element. But the queer books all have all the same like basic elements and basic tropes, and they'll touch on some other things as well, some things of community, some topics of they're inherently are going to be more political, but yeah, I think they still follow a lot of the same tropes and trajectories.
Yeah, I think it's like a Venn diagram. Like some of it is definitely unique to that community, but of course, love and connection is universal to everyone. So there are similar trajectories there too.
Yeah.
And Kate asked, do you encounter any romance novels in translation? So
Not as much. I don't think
I
kind of
think
thing.
in the US we mostly export our romance.
Yeah.
I just from my perspective, like I get a lot of like requests from overseas publishers asking to license like cover designs for their translations of American books. So I think in the English language we're kind of spearheading this renaissance of romance.
Yeah.
Are there different trends in graphic novel romance versus traditional romance? Actually, I can't even think of a graphic novel romance novel. I'm trying to think of one
The
now.
ones that come to mind are Heartstopper, the Alice
yeah.
Oseman ones, or Lore Olympus are really popular ones. I just the ones that we see in store tend to be ones that start out as web comics that then get traditionally published. Yeah, I don't. Do you work on like the graphic novel
I'm trying
side?
to think. Yeah, and I did work on Heartstoppers. Well, my company licensed it. But yeah, I don't know if there are different trends in the storylines for graphic novels versus traditional. I don't think there. I don't feel that there are.
In terms of storyline, probably just the fact that there is that visual element, similarly to movies or TV shows, but I think it's fairly similar. You can still tell the story in a similar way.
I will say I haven't seen edge print on a graphic novel yet. I'm sure that will change.
I do have one on one of the Lore Olympus ones.
I gotta tell
but
my
I think
designer.
that's like a fancy special edition.
My designer will be very excited to hear this.
Yeah.
How do you think the current political climate will boost romance's popularity? I think escapism being a large part of it. I think a lot of people look to that.
Yeah, I think escapism is definitely a big factor. I think there is a misconception that romance isn't political, but there is definitely political elements of any genre. But especially when you look at the more diverse romance books, and especially with the book bans that have been happening, which is such a thing to navigate. But especially when you're looking at ones where it's like books from like Black romances. Recently, Kennedy Ryan did a whole panel talking about how Black romances they're inherently political, and so there is going to be elements of their storytelling that is affected by what is happening. So we'll see. I hope that people find hope in the genre for sure.
If you were in a historical romance, what decade would you want to be in?
I think I'll stay in the present. Personally.
I'd love to be in the future, yeah. Where things are maybe a little bit better. Aesthetically, I love like Gilded Age. Joanna Shoup writes some fun Gilded Age, but I don't think I'd actually want to live in that time period.
Yeah, I think for myself, I put myself in the 90s. Just there's a certain nostalgia there, but just for that, just for that.
Are we calling 90s historical?
90s are historical. It was over 20 years ago.
I know. It's just scary to think about.
That's enough time to make something historical, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, probably. Live in like the Clueless, great romance teen coming of age movie. There you go.
Like if you look at the cover for Clueless, like I'm thinking of the movie, and you see that, don't you think, oh, vintage, historical? right?
I feel like historical, you think of like a little bit longer ago. I'm thinking like, yeah, Gilded Age.
Yeah, I
40s.
have seen 40s. I have seen some 70s or 80s. Like Daisy Jones and the Six, I guess, is kind of historical, not necessarily a romance, but in the 70s. So that would be, I just can't think of 90s as historical.
I feel like if we ask someone who's like in their teens, I wonder what they'd say. Oh, let's not do that.
Yeah, like I can't think about this too much. I'll have a whole existential crisis.
Well, we're rounding up to the end of our time here, and I want to thank you both, Katherine, Vianne. Thank you both for being on this program and talking about your views on romance and telling us about hearing about how you design these covers, and Katherine hearing about the store and your customer base and what you guys do when you display them. This has been really informative for me, and I really appreciate both of you being here to talk about this with us on a Wednesday evening.
Thanks for having me.
us. Yeah.
And thank you to our audience for coming as well and joining us on this virtual program. We have these on the third Wednesday of every month. We alternate between in-person and virtual. So I hope to see everyone at the next one, which will be about sustainability on, oh, now I can't remember. No, I am wrong. Sorry, I'm misleading everyone. Our next one is Women in Publishing at Macmillan Publishers at 120 Broadway. Thank you everyone for coming today. I hope you enjoyed this or found this enjoyable. If you have any comments, let us know. Tell us what your favorite romance books are, or the ones you hate the most are, and tell us what you're tired of. Thank you, everyone.